loved your ideas on the squeezy doll line.
Thanks.
What were you like when you were younger?
Oh, well, I wasn't much different.
Ejector seat!
Who are you? I'm his girlfriend. I want to spend the night with you.
Do you mean sleep over?
Yeah.
Okay. But I get to be on top.
What?
And a hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the studio for episode 204 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Monday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So as luck would have it, we have another on this day, a huge movie, but sort of a below the radar, oh, I wonder when this movie came out kind of thing. And it is a favorite, but it's a movie that I probably wouldn't have just done an episode on unless it happened to have been released on June 3rd, 1988. That is 36 years ago. Holy shit. The movie in question is Penny Marshall's whimsical, amazing body switch movie. Hollywood made a lot of body switch movies in the mid to late 1980s. But in this instance, it's a movie of very high quality, wonderful performances across the board, especially from its star, who received his first Oscar nomination, Tom Hanks, in the lead character of Joshua Baskin, a 12 or maybe a 13-year-old boy who just wants to be big. I wish I were big. I did not see this movie in theaters, sadly. The only movie, so stupid, I saw Red Heat in the summer of 1988, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jim Belushi film. It's kind of like the least of the Arnold movies from Commando, from Commando forward. You can go, I don't even know how many years forward. It's just not that good. It's somewhat entertaining. But the movie Big was an immediate hit with critics and audiences. And Tom was 30 going on 31 when he got the part. He was definitely 31 when he filmed. He was 31 when the film was released. He turned 32 in July. And the movie is streaming on Disney, for whatever that's worth, if you haven't seen it. I should always lead with that in case people want to go off and watch the movie before listening to me, ramble on about it. But the film got enormous critical acclaim, and in particular for its star, Tom Hanks, who he was seen as a light comedian, not a stand-up comic, although he did a stand-up comic in his next movie after Big, Punchline. He played a stand-up comic opposite Sally Field. And of course, the joke, literal joke as far as Hollywood, is that Tom Hanks and Sally Field played love interests in a 1988 film called Punchline. 6 years later in Forrest Gump, she's playing his mom. It's the old Cary Grant is potentially a love interest for Jesse Royce Landis in To Catch a Thief before he decides, no thank you, I'll take your daughter Grace Kelly, much obliged. But they, age appropriate, she could be the love interest for Cary, but then, 4 years later, the same actress Jesse Royce Landis plays Cary Grant's mom. This is the Tom Hanks and Sally Field version, 1988 version of what I just said. 29 years after North by Northwest. And then 34 years, after North by Northwest. 1988, love interest. 1994, playing his mom. As Goldie Hawn famously said in the First Wives Club, there's only 3 roles for women in Hollywood: babe, district attorney, driving Miss Daisy. Haven't seen much to change that, have we? It's very, very close to reality in the overwhelming majority of cases. But Tom Hanks in Big gives a transcendent performance. He was very likable, and he had a number of box office hits like Splash, and there were people who swear by the Money Pit, oh, it's hilarious. I thought he was terrific in Dragnet, didn't do as well as it could have. But he clearly wanted to do something different. Even though Big is a comedy, it is a whimsical fantasy movie. There are moments of real drama. You get just enough to understand just how harrowing, how scary it would be for somebody with a 12-year-old brain to suddenly have an adult life and adult responsibilities. It's something he thought he wanted until he realized he didn't. And when I mentioned this sort of series of body switch movies, big movies with big casts, mind you, in the 80s, you had Vice Versa, which was with Judge Reinhold and Fred Savage. You had, like, was it called like Father Like Son? With Kirk Cameron and I think Dudley Moore. And then there was a movie I really liked, better than the other two, 18 Again, with Charlie Schlatter and George Burns, among others. I mean, George Burns was such a treasure. He was such a treasure. He made it to 100. And George Burns, he was Generation X's Betty White, would be the best way to explain. He was a national treasure. Everyone loved him. The Oh God movies, the first and third are fucking great. The second one was terrible. But we love George Burns. And seeing George Burns essentially switch consciousness with his grandson, I thought it was fantastic. And it got the weakest reviews of all of the body switch movies of the 80s. But Big is also a body switch movie. It's just more of a age where he ages 20 years overnight. But it's the same general idea, trying to adjust to a new body, scary surroundings, and what the fuck am I going to do? Well, in the world of the movie Big, Tom Hanks makes friends when he becomes an adult. But he never loses, except for one critical moment in the third act. He maintains the childhood wonder and whimsy. And it's to the film's credit that it's a logical, as much as the story is absurd. Of course, this couldn't happen. It's, Groundhog Day level fantasy. We know this. It can't happen. But the movie takes that twist of a 12-year-old boy who makes a wish, and now he's in his 30s. It takes it seriously. And what Tom does in his performance is he shows you every side of how a 12-year-old would plausibly behave at 35. From the restlessness, the way that he speaks at a different canter when he's still thinking as a kid. It's really an incredible performance. And the young actor who played his best friend, the actor's name was Jared Rushton, didn't really do that much after Big, but he's really solid here. And Elizabeth Perkins as a kind of co-worker. Oh, where I was going with the believability factor. Video games existed, but computer games were still in the Stone Ages, and a job with a toy company for a kid would have meant a lot more in the mid to late 1980s than now. Now, with a gaming company, some kind of AI virtual reality video game programming situation, that would be the kind of the bee's knees of today for a 12-year-old boy. But in the world of the film, it's so logical that, well, he's going to live as an adult now until he can figure out how to become 12 years old again. He gets a job with a toy company. And Elizabeth Perkins, who's such a terrific actress, and I've mentioned her on the channel before, 3 years after Big, summer of 1991, she has an amazing supporting role opposite William Hurt in the fantastic film, The Doctor. And her character is essentially the anchoring of the movie. That it was sort of a weird line that the film took, but it works, where his wife and kid are not the ones responsible for his growth. It's mostly Elizabeth Perkins as a terminal cancer patient who humbles William Hurt and makes him understand, you've had a bad break, but you're still the luckiest son of a bitch I know. Don't lose sight of that. And it works. Normally you would think, oh, it's a depressive character. She makes it sing. And in this movie, she starts off in one place. She's trying to act more adult than she actually is because she has a great job with this toy company. But as she meets and first becomes friends with and then romantic partners with Josh, not realizing it's a 12-year-old in a 30-something-year-old's body, it humanizes her and she takes on more childlike characteristics. And this is a theme in this movie, that it's okay to not completely shed your childlike innocence and wonder. It's something people have always said about Steven Spielberg, that he never lost that spring and has never lost that spring in his step and that ability to believe in magic even when you don't really believe in magic. So Hanks and Elizabeth Perkins are really good together. And then another actor who unfortunately has passed, a terrific performer, John Hurd. You probably don't know the name, but he plays the dad in the Macaulay Culkin Home Alone movies. And he's mostly the much put upon Peter McAllister. But in this film, he plays kind of an antagonist. He doesn't like that this guy, we don't know anything about him, and he seems to have gotten in the boss's good graces, and he's moving up the ladder in our company. And what's the story with this guy? How can he be this good at his job? Well, because he actually is a kid. And if he has enough patience, he can take direction, and he might have some actual good ideas. Here's the funny part, though. Now, two of the guilty pleasure movies that I've discussed on this channel, Gen X standards both, Sylvester Stallone's Over the Top, and the sensationally inappropriate but screamingly funny John Candy, Eugene Levy classic, Armed and Dangerous. In both of those movies, the late, great Robert Loggia, who had been nominated for an Oscar for Jagged Edge, 1985, terrific film, Glenn Close, Jeff Bridges, Peter Boyle, amazing cast. Robert Loggia was a sublimely talented actor, and he worked steadily in the 80s. He turned around from Jagged Edge and he made Armed and Dangerous. Now, I think Armed and Dangerous is a fucking scream. It is a hilarious way to pass 90 minutes because Candy and Levy were magic together. But Robert Loggia plays a crime boss and he is utterly wasted. You didn't need an actor of his caliber with his chops to play that part. Anybody could have done it. He is totally wasted. And then the next year in Over the Top, he is completely wasted in that also guilty pleasure movie. He's got nothing to do other than fret and complain and bitch and moan about how Stallone's character is a layabout, he's a bum, he's a loser, I don't want him anywhere near my grandson, yada, 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 yada. Whoever cast Big, I don't know if it was Penny Marshall herself, the filmmaker. Penny Marshall answered to I think she's the answer to the trivia question, the first female director to helm a $100 million grossing film, Penny Marshall, Big, which grossed over $150 million, to be completely accurate. But whoever was responsible for casting Robert Loggia as the head of the toy company, the universe thanks them. Because what Loggia does in that role is what he didn't get the opportunity to do in either of the two other films, 1986, 87, the two guilty pleasure movies. He does not get to do anything. He is hamstrung by the script, which has his character just basically be a stereotypical crime boss, a stereotypical asshole, and nothing more. So when we see him in this film, we're expecting more of the same. But the movie surprises us. He turns out to not just be a hard-working, hard-charging CEO of this toy company, but a guy who is actually open to new ideas. It's not my way or the highway. It's, hey, wait a minute. Who is this kid? I like this kid. What's his story? Well, we don't really know. Well, no, that's okay. Well, you can't promote him. Yeah, I can. I like his ideas. And he takes part in an iconic scene at the real-life toy store, which I'd been to a couple of times when I was a kid. Unbelievable. Kid in a candy store, kid in a toy store, same thing. FAO Schwartz in Manhattan. The most expensive toys in the world were at FAO Schwartz. But it's a scene where they both play a piano, it's like an exhibit in the store. I assume that if you wanted to buy it for your house, if you're a multimillionaire, you could. That's what it's doing there. And they basically play chopsticks with their feet. It's a top 10, certainly all time from the 1980s. And there are those that would say, I mean, when Tom Hanks retires, that scene is going to be shown. And when Robert Loggia unfortunately passed away in about 2015 or so, that was the clip we saw. It's so perfect. And it's so much in keeping with what we learn of his character that, yes, he looks like a crusty, crotchety guy. Loggia was actually playing older. In real life, he was still in his 50s, but he definitely is supposed to be older than 57 at the time of that movie. Josh is a kid in a man's body. And the toy maker, the CEO of this toy company, is still a kid at heart. And they play chopsticks on this gigantic, what amounts to a gigantic piano player. And it is a scene of such beauty and charm that at the end of the movie, and years later even, when people think of the movie, that's what they think of. And Loggia kind of joked about it. He got asked about that scene for the rest of his life. Even when he was on The Sopranos, he's doing an interview. Oh, you're going to be on The Sopranos. And hey, how about playing chopsticks with Tom Hanks in Big? Sometimes you just can't get away from it. But it showed what he was able to do in the right role. And every scene with him sings because the character was so well written and well constructed and thought through. We're not going to make this another stereotypical Robert Loggia heavy or even just a humble good guy. No, we want to give this guy layers. We want the audience to understand him, why he makes the decisions that he makes. Nothing wrong with a little hustle. Because the Robert Loggia of those other movies, of Armed and Dangerous and Over the Top, if young Josh Baskin had run into him, he's getting fired. They're going to haul his ass out and throw him in the fucking trash. There's nothing wrong with a little hustle. Where are you off to? And that's how Tom Hanks and Josh Baskin gets in good with the boss. So the mechanics of plot aren't really that important. And if we're being completely honest and fair, it's a fantasy. Mercedes Ruehl, who later won an Oscar for a marvelous performance in The Fisher King, another one of my favorite movies of all time, Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges, Amanda Plummer, and Mercedes Ruehl, who knocked it out of the fucking park in that film. Man, what a performance. She plays Josh's mom. And that's the one part of the movie where Penny Marshall soft pedals, because we get her grief. And she does get an idea throughout the film that Josh is not dead. Because the real Josh, who can't just suddenly show up at home, hey, I'm 32 or whatever, has answered questions to her satisfaction that she knows that her son is not dead. But that being said, she would have a way crazier reaction. And the police and FBI would be involved. They would be swarming all over the place. The movie doesn't really go down. It doesn't really go down that road. What the movie does show is you should never lose your childlike wonder, even in a hard, angry, contentious, unforgiving world. And there's a lot to be said for that. Another concept that went right over my head watching the film for the first time, I don't know if I rented it. I might have gotten the pay-per-view. I think I got the pay-per-view and then taped it. You know, this is something we used to do a million years ago. If you were going to purchase a film for rent for $3, whatever it was, might as well tape it. What if it's something you really like? That's how I saw Die Hard. I rented it from pay-per-view. Arnold, Predator, 1987, same thing. And Big, got the pay-per-view. And I was pretty sure I was going to enjoy it. Even though some of the clips didn't really look that interesting. Oh, and there was a young woman who I went to high school with. I think she was a grade behind me, named Samantha Larkin. She's in the credits. She's one of the friends in the scene where young Josh, played really, really well by David Moscow. Man, he sells it. And you know what? The facial structure, it's not that crazy that he could grow up to Tom Hanks. We've seen movies where, give me a fucking break. At least it was in the ballpark. But when Josh is trying to chat with the girl who's a little taller than him, hey, when I was 12, you look at, not that you would, but if you looked at pictures and video from my bar mitzvah, the girls are all taller than me. Almost every girl is taller than me. In most cases, I ended up being 10 inches taller than them. But at that time, boys don't necessarily hit the growth spurt, or they grow slower. They don't have a year where they suddenly sprout 4 or 5 inches. It's a little bit different. So he meets the girl that he's trying to, schmooze with, and it doesn't work out because he can't get on the ride because he's too small. And one of the friends is this girl at the Massapequa High School, class of 92. She was probably class of 93. But Samantha Lark, I remember seeing her at school. It was really fucking cool. I didn't know her, but just the fact that, holy shit, that girl's in Big. Yeah, watch the movie. It's her. Yeah, it's her. Just a little historical Massapequa tidbit for you. I just saw it as a great entertainment as a kid. I laughed. I didn't cry, but it tells a fully rounded story. And there was a part of me that didn't understand why he wanted to go back. That his life is now a lot better. He's doing great. Why doesn't he just tell Susan the truth and stay where he is? She's probably not going to believe him. But that's the other side of it. He has so much life to live. He will love, he will lose. Maybe he'll end up in the toy business, maybe he won't. Maybe he and Susan will reconnect a decade hence. Maybe they won't. But you don't want to skip past anything. And to a very small extent, this is one parallel the movie has with Click, the Adam Sandler film from 2006 with Adam and Kate Beckinsale. It's not very good. But the idea of fast forwarding just to the good parts. Adam Sandler has this remote control, and it's funny because Kate Beckinsale is wants him to do chores, and he'll fast forward to when they're having sex. And then he starts fast forwarding all of the non-exciting bits. Josh's life at age 32, or however old he's supposed to be, there's very little non-exciting bits. But you gotta live. You gotta go through your teen years. The good, the bad, and the ugly of the teen years. You gotta go to college. You have to make your own path, not this particular path which fate threw upon you. This is not your path. This is part of your story, this fantastical twist. It's part of your life story. You don't just punt away 20 years of your life if you don't have to. And all of these questions, the movie does not really get into any of it. But as an older person, it's all there. It's not even there in the subtext. It's there in the text. It's right in front of you. Don't lose your childlike wonder, but don't try to fast forward through life, because you might wake up one day and it's 20 years later, metaphorically speaking. And Josh has so much more to do in his younger days before the workaday world. I mean, the fact that he would even contemplate staying when he could be fucking around, having summers off, going to camp, telling stories about how he hooked up with a hot girl and she was really into it. Gotta go back. And I'm happier now than I was back then that he ends up going back, returning to youth. The other Tom Hanks Disney movie, Splash, the Ron Howard film, I love 80 to 90% of it, and I think the ending is catastrophically bad. I hated the ending the first time I saw the film in 1985, and I still hate the ending. On Big, my feelings and thoughts have evolved. Tom Hanks' performance, he could have won the Oscar. Unfortunately, he was up against Dustin Hoffman in the runaway train that was Rain Man. But if you ask me the question, I don't think that Dustin even gave the best performance in that movie. His character is one note. It's brilliant from a technical standpoint. You can't do it any better than Dustin does it there. But Tom Cruise acts him off the screen. Tom Cruise runs that movie. He drives the action. And his character actually learns something, starts the film as an apparently unredeemable asshole, gains a sense of self and of family and understanding. I got a long way to go too. I didn't know I had a brother, and even if we're not going to see each other every day, he's going to be in my life, whether or not I'm in the automobile business, and whether or not I still think my dad screwed me over in the will. I'll find my own path. I'll be okay. Tom Cruise is phenomenal in Rain Man, as he was phenomenal in The Color of Money, another movie where he could have gotten a nomination. Paul Newman walks away with Best Actor, the Best Actor Oscar. I love Paul Newman. Tom Cruise fucking runs circles around him in that movie. Anyway, if you ask me, Tom Hanks could have easily taken the Best Actor award because of how much work he put into this role. He doesn't take any scenes off. And there are subtle shifts when he's Josh Baskin, the adult. There are subtle shifts in tone and how he reads his lines, how he engages with the other. It's also not something that was making an impression on me as a kid. You watch the movie now, and you notice that from scene to scene, as he becomes more comfortable in the adult skin, he starts to sound less like a kid and more like an adult in terms of his canter, of his speech. It's all very carefully calibrated. And I'm sure that Penny Marshall got that out of him. But you got to give credit to the actor. He did a lot more with that role than I thought the first number of times I saw it. Because, you're a kid. You just want to be entertained. And even watching the film in my early 20s at NYU, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is actually a better Tom Hanks performance in Philadelphia, where his character is a one-note character. Or even in Forrest Gump. You could argue it's a one-note character, much the same way of Dustin Hoffman. Well, I'd like to see a movie with Raymond Babbitt from Rain Man and Forrest Gump. Put those two guys together. Holy shit. A road movie with those two guys. That's something I'd love to see. Not really. Just kidding. It's kind of interesting, though, that those kinds of characters, characters who have some kind of social issues or difficulty relating or reacting in what we would consider a normal fashion. I just thought of Janet. Big was an enormous box office hit, and it is sitting at an astounding 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I remember it getting great reviews and a lot of people talking up Tom Hanks, and this was a kind of thing where people were definitely rooting for Tom Hanks. He already had that everyman quality where he didn't really have what you would consider leading man looks, but people loved his talent and his ability, what he had done in comedies, and they thought it was great that he actually had more. To fast forward to the end, so to speak, Hanks didn't really start to click as a dramatic actor. This is his own words. I'm not just, going off on my own here. A League of Their Own is the first film that he really gets it, what he was trying to do. He attempted it with Bonfire of the Vanities, but he was miscast. And Brian De Palma, I don't think, had the right idea for that character. But when Hanks took that role, he took the role of Sherman McCoy. It probably he would have been cast about a year or so after Big came out. So he's still very young. Tom was 32, 33 at the time, 1989, when he was cast late in 89. The film went before cameras like early 1990 into the middle of that year. But there was talk of Oscar buzz, and Hanks thought that was the kind of role where he could get another Oscar nomination if it was done correctly. I think the movie was always going to be a misfire. But they took a risk. De Palma took a risk, the studio took a risk, and Tom Hanks took a big risk. And the failure of Bonfire of the Vanities temporarily set back his career. And he's talked about how he had kind of long talks with himself where he kept thinking, I can do more. I can hold the camera differently. I can be more still. I can do this. And obviously he ended up being very, very right about that. And A League of Their Own, to me, is the first vintage great dramatic Tom Hanks performance. And that's 4 years after Big. But Big, in a comedy drama realm, is just about as good as you can do it. Tom Hanks nailed it in a great movie. I have no reservation. This is a great film. Big. Released on this day, 1988, June 3rd, 1988. Directed by Penny Marshall and starring Tom Hanks, Elizabeth Perkins, Robert Loggia, David Moscow, Jared Rushton, and the future Academy Award winner for Best Supporting Actress, Mercedes Ruehl. This has been episode 204 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday afternoon into early evening with me here in New York. If you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you caught the episode on Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 205 real soon. Till then, peace.